This movie was supposed to come out in December 2019. Anybody else remember that? With everything that's happened since, I completely forgot about it, and it's my self-appointed job to keep up with this bullshit. And in one of those great ironies of life you can only see in retrospect, the WB delayed it that first time because they didn't want to go head-to-head with The Rise of Skywalker. Director Patty Jenkins was optimistic at the time. After all, the film was done with 5 months left to go on the clock, which is no small feat in this age where editors are often chained to their consoles up until the very last minute, carrying out directives from some studio boss who saw a chart somewhere that says, ooh, our target demographic in this particular region of Thailand needs X to be in the movie and X to be taken out of it. I was less optimistic. But I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to become what I hate. Exactly like what happened with Rise of Skywalker, now that I think about it. For 6 years, by that point, I'd watched plenty of people, even people I otherwise admire and respect, shit all over DC's live-action superhero movies for the twin, apparently capital crimes of A, existing, and or B, not being Marvel movies. This led me to suppress what I intuitively understood from the beginning. That Wonder Woman 2, as it was known back when it was announced, was in serious trouble. Because it was to be co-written by the then Chief Creative Officer of DC Comics, Geoff Johns. It's been a while since I torpedoed any chances I might have for future employment in the comic book industry by criticizing Mr. Johns on camera. The last review where I really aired these grievances keeps getting worldwide blocked by YouTube's copyright robots, so don't bother trying to look for it. All you really need to know is, once upon a time, Mr. Johns was just a kid from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, who uncovered a box full of old Green Lantern and Flash comics in his grandma's attic. He then moved to LA as an adult, got a job interning for Richard Donner on the movie Conspiracy Theory, leveraged that into a job writing actual DC comics, and he spent the 2000s on a meteoric rise through the company. Some might even say he failed upward. To the point where everyone looked around in 2011 and found themselves face to face with a Green Lantern movie. And they were all much sorrier for it. That movie was, and still is, stunningly mediocre, verging on outright bad, just like the vast majority of Johns' writing. Something about sending his ideas through the Hollywood machine seemed to strip them of the high-pro gloss that you'd think turning them into movies should add. Not that anyone wanted to hear that at the time. A stunning majority of my fellow DC fans thought then, and some still think today, that Johns was some kind of savior. He who had brought Hal Jordan and Barry Allen back from the dead would somehow, through his ability to write comic books that seem tailor-made to be turned into generic Hollywood action movies, he alone would save us from an age of Marvel movies ruling the box office unopposed, because that was so important to some people at the time. Besides, by then he was like the number 3 or 4 guy in the company, so criticizing his work was pretty useless for anything besides getting fired, as many a former writer or artist at DC Comics can now attest. And now even former actors. Hashtag I stand with Ray Fisher, for whatever that's worth. Team Super Science for the win. This longing for Geoff Johns to rule the roost continued throughout the Zack Snyder era, when the whole of DC fandom rent itself apart over the question of whether or not $800 million counts as a successful Superman movie. I'm joking, of course. Actually, they rent themselves apart over questions of a hero's moral responsibility for the collateral damage his fight scenes cause. which is only right and proper, and actually the point, as the sequel to Man of Steel makes abundantly clear. And whether or not Snyder ripped the ending of Man of Steel off from Wonder Woman Volume 2, number 219, cover dated September 2005, when Diana had to snap a dude's neck on live TV, lest he continue to mind control Superman. Which is a funny story that sounds unbelievable, so it's probably true. For years, rumors swirled that Johns was trying to become DC's own Kevin Feige, the one producer to rule them all and bind a phalanx of filmmakers together, creating a singular vision for the DC's cinematic universe that could not be easily dismissed as dark or grim or gritty or whatever else the internet commentariat has decided to use as slurs. A singular vision that, not to put too fine a point on it, was not Zack Snyder's. The closest we've gotten to that so far was 2017's theatrical cut of Justice League, about which I've already said my piece. After its failure, Geoff Johns stepped down as chief creative officer of the company, apparently to fulfill his lifelong dream of making a Titans TV show where Dick Grayson swears, and continuing to write comic books on the side. It seems he finished that other blasphemous sequel to Watchmen, Doomsday Clock, just in time to start this collaboration with Patty Jenkins. And the results are, surprise, surprise, stunningly mediocre, verging on outright bad. Oh, but it takes place mostly in the daytime, and the colors are properly saturated, so I guess this is what people want. Come on, hogs, come get your slop. I know movies of this size are big, complex machines, and that no one person can be held singularly responsible for the results, no matter how coherent they may or may not be. But that said, this is also the internet, where we love singling out people and turning them into folk demons. And I've had beef with Geoff Johns since before it was cool. So, also, there are plenty of assholes out there pinning all of this movie's faults directly on Patty Jenkins. And, like I said, I don't want to become what I hate. The moment word got out Johns was co-writing this script, I felt the old familiar fear creep up my spine. The spirit of 2005. But I kept my damn mouth shut until I had the actual movie in front of me. And now that I have, I find Wonder Woman 1984 a fascinating mess. It's far worse than I could have possibly imagined. And as a consequence, far more interesting to talk about. First of all, why is this set in 1984? The obvious answer is, well, Diana's last movie was set in 1918, and we have to fill the gap between that and Batman v Superman with something. But this continues a trend, already worrying back in 2018, of making every single solo female superhero movie of the post-Avengers era a period piece. There's an article on comicbookresources.com, probably the last good article on comicbookresources.com, from 2018, written by Angie Dahl in the lead-up to Captain Marvel's release, called Why Are Female Superhero Movies Set in the Past? It answers its own question with, to paraphrase, nostalgia's a hell of a drug, which is true, and, to quote directly, studios are likely uncomfortable showing sexism in the present day, especially given the current social climate. Unquote. By the current social climate, I'm pretty sure Dahl means the hashtag #MeToo campaign, since this was before the whole of Hollywood just threw Me Too under the bus for the sake of electing Joe Biden. But to quote further, by keeping the story, and therefore the sexism in the past, the films are insulated against some of the harsher audience reaction to a hot-button subject. With the sexism safely contained in another era, writers and directors aren't responsible for creating commentary on what's still happening in the present day. Unquote. Both those sentences still contain some grains of truth, no matter how naive the intervening hellish years have made them seem. Turns out, all Captain Marvel had to do to inspire harsher audience reactions was get up on a stage and dare to wonder aloud, hey, where are all the lady film critics at? Something I used to shout in the lobbies of theaters holding press screenings without drawing so much as a rude stare. And while creative types of all stripes love dodging responsibility, some of us have long held to the theory that period pieces exist specifically to comment on the present day, while maintaining plausible artistic deniability. To me, Wonder Woman 84 bears this out, because it is, far more so than its predecessor, or its cross-studio competition, a transparent attempt to comment upon American life, and American sexism, while we're at it, in the last few years of the 2010s, or 20-teens, or whatever the fuck you call this decade that's just passed. Like, I don't know, post your own name for it in the comments, I guess. Call to action. We might as well call it the Trump era, because Donald Trump's election was as traumatic a national event, in its own way, as 9/11. And just like 9/11, we dealt with it in the worst fucking way possible. Neither were supposed to happen. America's right-wing ruling class consensus was supposed to have everything all buttoned up forever and ever, amen. When that didn't happen, when something came along that completely surprised everyone who isn't stupid rich, it broke the brains of our entire political media. And just like the bad old days after 9/11, one of the most brain-dead, centrist, liberal responses to all this was, well, at least we'll get some good art out of it. Those of us who talk about popular art for a living instantly knew that this was a hideous delusion, because we remember the W. Bush era with no fondness for its art or anything else. Unless, of course, Spider-Man 2 is still your favorite superhero movie, in which case, hey, you're in luck, bro. You're probably going to love this one too. Because it, too, is slavishly beholden to the formulas that Richards, Donner, and Lester set down without even really trying back in the early 1980s. Oh, it's the second movie, so the hero has to lose their powers, and at least kinda sorta question whether they want to keep doing this hero shit at all. But then not really, because of course, if they actually did give up doing this hero shit, then the movie would just end at the second act, and we could all go home early. As such, WW84 sees Diana of Themyscira, working as a Smithsonian cultural anthropologist by day, and friendly neighborhood Wonder Woman by, well, also by day, since I guess they don't have punch-in clocks at the Smithsonian's back end. I don't know. And setting too much of this at night might make people call it dark. We'll only use darkness to hide our crappy cat person CGI, because, oh shit, Cats came out while we were making this, and who could have seen that coming? Except for, everyone who can't afford to go to Broadway shows. Like, after she foils the robbery of a mall jewelry store that's actually a front for black market artifact dealing, which some people have a problem with, but hey, it's a mall in Northern Virginia, and the Pentagon really is just down the highway, so, whatever. Somebody's smuggling shit out the back before they ship it off to Area 51, where they got the Ark of the Covenant stored. It's fine. The FBI asked Diana's Smithsonian colleague, Dr. Barbara Minerva, to look into the artifacts. One appears fake at first glance, with a Latin message on the base that says it grants wishes. but further digging indicates it was meant for an up-and-coming oil man named Max Lord, who soon arrives and starts getting real friendly with the Smithsonian's hot nerd archaeology department. Max Lord was, and probably still is as far as I know, a long-term Justice League antagonist who's done many and various evil things since his debut in the middle 80s, up to and including that incident I mentioned previously, where Diana had to snap his neck like a chicken bone. And none of that really matters, since here he is almost completely reconstructed, from his bad dye job hair down to his 2 shiny shoes, into a non-actionable but still very much recognizable satire of one Donald J. Trump. Specifically, Max is the fantasy version of Trump that other rich people make up at Beverly Hills fundraisers for Dianne Feinstein, say. Or Silicon Valley fundraisers for Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris. As such, he is a confusing chimera of mismatched cultural signifiers, ensuring that the satire will not land anywhere near its intended target. The real Trump would probably take one look at this guy and say, "Meh, he's a loser. Get him off the screen. Fast forward to the action scenes." Max is a Ponzi schemer with an empty office in a too-big-for-him building with a golden name above the door. When pressed, he calls himself a television personality, on a quest for more. More money, more power, and more people staring at him from the safety of the other side of a screen. He believes in the power of positive thinking so hard that he dedicated his life to finding a stone that grants wishes. And once he gets it, just like Jafar wishing to be a genie, he wishes to become the wishing stone himself, and then use the price of other people's wishes to gain all the money and power in the world that he feels is his due. And more. Because why not have more? So far, so good, right? And admittedly, for the first 2 acts, Max does proceed on a fairly logical path to power for a superhero fantasy action film that's slavishly beholden to the work of Richard Donner. But because even the dumbest $100 million plus franchise films can't help but try and humanize their antagonists, we find, in an unfortunate twist, that Max is doing all this out of sincere love for his son. And this is where the Max Lord as supervillain Trump metaphor completely breaks down and takes the entire film with it, as far as I'm concerned. Other people think other things might tank this movie outright, and, that's fine for them. But heroes are defined by their villains. And this movie couldn't decide whether it wanted Max to be Trump or to be Max. At some point, someone seems to have thought, well, let's split the difference and do both at the same time, because that won't confuse and annoy people any more than any of our other choices might already be doing. No. And I think I know who that person was, but honestly, I'm biased. This Max is a divorced dad trying to impress his kid, who's 8, going on 10, going on 40, in 1984. So, quite frankly, he'd be impressed by a big screen TV and a few VHS tapes of G.I. Joe. But never mind. Max is trying to impress his kid because Max's own father was a drunken, abusive asshole, whose lack of conventional success doomed Max to an early life of poverty and misery. So Max's drive to wish himself into becoming the Horatio Alger of the 1980s is really a drive to avoid passing his daddy issues down to his son. Never realizing, until the last minute, and with a little help from the lasso of truth, naturally, that one can give a kid just as many daddy issues by being an absentee workaholic asshole as they can by being a drunken abusive asshole. Even before one almost accidentally destroys the world. Hey, Dad, you remember that time you got on every TV on Earth and started ranting like you do after your third beer? We don't talk about that in this house, son. One thing that's become clear to me after 4 years of escalating madness is that the American imagination was completely incapable of processing Donald Trump's rise to political power. The only explanations it offers involve some form of magic. There's the secular kind. Oh, Russian hackers brainwashed everyone with memes they stole from Gamergators. And then there's the outright supernatural kind that we get here, with a stone made by the literal god of lies. And in the real world, the outright magical explanation involves the literal God of Abraham appointing Donald Trump to lead a righteous crusade against the deep state pedos through the democratic will of they, the people, his fans, who consider themselves the only real people in a sea of satanic zombies. Oh no, never mind. Don't look at those Epstein flight logs. No. The real horror of Trump, the banal evil of him, you might say, is that he's little more than a spoiled daddy's boy who got handed everything in his entire fucking life, lost it all several times over, and regained it because at a very formative age, he learned the ability to filibuster his way through a conversation. And I put conversation in quotes because have you heard him talk? Like, to other people? Since they barely exist for him, and to the true narcissist, other people are basically shadows in a fog. He doesn't talk to them so much as at them. Very much like I'm doing to you right now. And because that's really annoying when you don't have a pause button sitting right there, or a mute button to make somebody shut up, most people, normal people, just get fed up and give him whatever the hell they think he wants until he goes away. There's the real art of the deal right there, and anybody telling you anything else is trying to sell you something. But that's too grim and or gritty, so the American imagination must offer up some kind of magical explanation for how this, of all things, could attain the highest office in the land. Partially this is because the liberal critique of Trump has always been wrong. It's not that he's a spoiled rich boy with daddy issues. Oh, no. No, see, those are both our favorite superheroes and our favorite politicians' big money donors. So, it can't be that. Oh, no. It's that he's the wrong kind of spoiled rich boy with daddy issues, you see. The kind who spends all of his money on golf courses and gold toilets, when he should be spending it on sending his dipshit kids to the right schools, where they can join the right frats and learn the right secret handshakes. Because that's what passes for meritocracy in my shithole country of these United States, and only an entitled baby would want to cheat that system by skipping out on all that humiliating self-debasement. Or so goes the consensus of the ruling class of my society. Which is how you can get a supposedly optimistic, uplifting throwback of a superhero fantasy film that equates wishing with lying and lying with cheating. It's not that a dream is a wish the heart makes. Not anymore. Oh no. That's some 1950s bullshit right there. And in our benighted 21st century, a wish is a dream that your primitive cerebrum must be forcibly woken up from, because better things aren't possible. And anyone who tells you they are is a lying liar. Now, look. I don't know Donald Trump, so back when all this started, I did a lot of reading to try and get to know him. And this frustrated and annoyed me, so I can see why most people don't even try. There really is no there, right? There's just not that much to know. But we know for a fact that the real Trump has nothing but contempt for his own kids. Except for the one he seems to see as, and has personally groomed to be, a Rule 63 version of himself. One of the sons, Don Jr. or Eric, I forget which, used to tell a story about being 4 years old and having his father say to him just as he was heading out the door to school, "Don't trust anyone ever." Immediately, Don Sr. turned around and asked, "Do you trust me?" And little Don Jr., or Eric, again, whichever, naturally replied, "Of course I do. You're my dad." To which his dad said, "What did I just say? Jesus Christ, I guess my son's a loser then. Oh well." So that's how the real Trump treats his really real kids in real life. They had it all ready right there in their hands and they chickened out at the last minute. Because such a total amount of child traumatizing narcissism is again too dark and or grim and or gritty for most people. Even when they're trying to make Trump into a supervillain. You could wrap Trump up in the lasso of truth and he'd still say all the same bullshit he just says anyway. Which is exactly what another version of Max Lord did once upon a time, prompting Diana to twist his beer cap. Now it's time to talk about Barbara Minerva, the other villain in this typical superhero sequel that by unwritten movie law must have at least 2 villains. The comics have been trying to turn Barbara into Diana's nemesis for years, with middling success. And this movie does her no favors by turning her into an awkward nerd. By which I mean, they put her in clothes that are supposed to be read as frumpy, but to me just read 80s, and the biggest pair of glasses they could find. Which is even funnier to me than it would have been otherwise, because I just rewatched Rising Sun, where they tried to pull the same trick with Tia Carrera. Then, as now, it's not like I don't know what Tia Carrera or Kristen Wiig look like, but I'm supposed to believe that she's not fighting potential suitors off with sticks just because she's wearing glasses and can't walk in heels. Like, I'm sorry, what? Was this not exactly the type of thing the last Wonder Woman movie made fun of? To rapturous applause? What, am I not supposed to remember that either? Like, I didn't just watch it in preparation for this thing, so I could literally see the downward spiral? Hell of it is, the comic book cheetah I grew up with would have actually been the perfect complement to an I can't believe it's not Trump main antagonist. She's like an evil version of Lara Croft. Born to money and privilege, but of that British lordly kind that's in severe self-sabotaging decline, and has been for the entire last century by this point. The exact opposite of a Trumpian social climber with a chip on his shoulder, but equally as avaricious, narcissistic, full of nothing but guile and spite, and prone to using other people for her own ends, which usually involves stealing some kind of mysterious and powerful ancient artifact, pretty much just for the sake of having it. Like an Indiana Jones villain, only instead of finding the Holy Grail, Barbara found just the right combination of plant juice and human blood to turn into an immortal cat person. In a fictional African nation, no less. Oh, hi, T'Challa. Didn't see you there. R.I.P., by the way. And I think I just figured out why they changed Barbara's origin story so much. So the question becomes, did they have to change it into something as boring, and by now rote, as awkward nerd goes from 0 to psycho in under a week after tasting the slightest amount of power? Apparently, yes. Jamie Foxx's Electro and Jim Carrey's Riddler stand in silent condemnation from the sidelines. At least the Riddler had a plan. Dumb as it was. Like movie Electro, movie Cheetah aimlessly wanders around this plot until she jumps onto the main villains because she doesn't actually have a villain plot of her own. Beyond, keep the superpowers I wished for. And hell, why not wish for more? Because if there's one thing female villains need to do more often, it's become the henchwomen of male villains. And if there's one thing female heroes need to do more often, it's wish for a man to complete their otherwise seemingly empty and meaningless lives. 'Cause that's what Wonder Woman's all about. Yeah, sure. Now we come to the big can of worms this movie opened up without even seeming to try. Would you put your dead boyfriend's brain in someone else's body? Not on purpose, surely. Diana wishes for Steve's return before she knows to take the Dreamstone's power seriously. But if you accidentally wished your dead boyfriend's brain into someone else's body, would you just kinda roll with it? All the way into bed with him, say? Apparently Diana would. And she doesn't think twice about it till the morning after, when she's already got his pre-chewed Pop-Tarts in her mouth. No, that's not a euphemism. I'm being literal. And this was, to quote director Patty Jenkins, the great love story meant to distract us from this movie's failed satire of a main villain plot and paint-by-numbers secondary antagonist. And it succeeded, by making the entire internet commentariat spend a whole week debating just what kind of sexual crime Diana is now guilty of. So, hey, congratulations everyone! You went out of your way to avoid making Wonder Woman a murderer, more so than she is already, given what she did to General Erich Ludendorff, which, let me be clear, I fully support, and somebody should have done in real life, because then maybe World War II would have not happened? Maybe gone a little better? Actually, what was Diana up to in World War II? Oops, we never know. So anyway, you went out of your way to avoid making Diana even more of a murderer, but then you tripped over your own squeamishness and wound up making Diana a rapist? First-degree sexual assaulter? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and these days I get out of jury duty by just saying all cops are bastards to the judge, so. And besides, I'd much rather litigate Geoff Johns. Read enough of his comics and you start to realize that, no matter their gender, the Johnsian hero is always flummoxed by situations that, under the pen of any other writer, they'd solve in like 2 pages max. And while Chris Pine is far more bearable when he's not doing a William Shatner impression, his Steve Trevor could be replaced by literally anyone, so long as they needed the plot explained to them by Diana. Granted that anyone would need help out with the action scenes, so, gee, if only Diana had just made a new friend at work whose wish for superpowers suddenly came true one day. A friend who could go on to betray Diana once she realizes she values those powers more than their friendship. Which is kind of what happens, but in another typical move for Geoff Johns comics, the emphasis is on the wrong syllable, if you know what I'm saying. Besides, Diana's too busy globe-trotting with Steve to notice her new work friend's sudden preference for hooker boots and stereotypical evil eyeshadow. Until it's too late, and they're fighting in the White House, in the one action scene I unabashedly enjoyed. Yeah, you fuck that White House up, ladies, and don't stop until you make Aaron Sorkin cry. Unfortunately, the budding, flowering, and eventual decay of Diana and Barbara's friendship couldn't be the great love story Patty Jenkins talked about. More's the pity. The combination of good old-fashioned American Puritanism and the various backward-ass state censorship regimes that every movie that wants to be truly worldwide has to put itself through eventually did conspire, and will continue to conspire in the future to make sure that movie Diana will never be even the least little bit gay. Hell, DC's still too scared to even try that today in any comic that's not labeled Elseworlds. Oh yeah, we'll try it with the Green Lantern nobody cares about in the alternate dimension that even fewer people care about, and that we're just going to wipe out of existence again anyway, but that's all you get. Oh yeah, I take my work friends out to swanky restaurants with stunning views of the Washington Monument all the time, and there's nothing romantic about that at all. Oh no. Why do you ask? I can see the Johnsian logic at work at this, combining with old school producer logic to create all the problems people have with this picture. At least all the ones I have. As much as Johns likes to big up the Silver Age of comics, the 50s and 60s, his writing is permanently stuck in the Bronze Age of the 70s and 80s. An age when comics became even more inspired by movies and TV shows than they were already. And what are the three things people who don't read comic books know about Wonder Woman? She's got the lasso of truth, her boyfriend's name is Steve Trevor, and she flies an invisible jet. The things they learned from Linda Carter's TV show in the 70s. This movie sees bringing Steve back to life as an attempt at fan service, and uses his presence to justify bringing in the jet, eventually. After all, somebody's got to fly it, and give a quite nice, honestly, monologue about flying that will eventually teach Diana how to fly under her own power. Because if there's one thing female heroes need more of, it's being told how to do something by their dead boyfriends. Speaking of monologues, Diana does here what people have been asking Clark Kent to do ever since they repressed their memories of Superman 4. Save the world with a stirring speech at the end. The fact that people hate it is proof of this movie's thesis that getting what you want can actually be the worst thing in the world. But as an 80s set action movie, all of its action set pieces must be 80s action movie cliches. The armed robbery, the car chase, the big, boring punch-em-up climax, as Mr. Nobody would put it. Ultimately, the only reason that Cheetah is here. But then, because this film at least began life in 2017, we get another climax, with the main villain, wherein he's redeemed through the power of love and truth and empathy, the way actual villains never are. I get it, though. We wish that were the case. Which would be fine if this movie didn't spend the rest of its runtime equating wishing with lying and lying with cheating. Because, to quote Diana's moral of the story, this world was a beautiful place, just as it was. And you cannot have it all. You can only have the truth. And the truth is enough. End quote. Like I said, better things aren't possible. And I'm just going to officially throw a bullshit flag on that play. Number 03, defense, 5 yards, repeat first down. So hey, congratulations everybody, you made a bad Wonder Woman movie. meaning Diana has officially joined her Justice League co-founders in every sense, both textual and metatextual. It's not even the first bad Wonder Woman movie, and it certainly won't be the last, with number 3 already greenlit, and Geoff Johns still right there. May not be the number 3 or 4 guy in the company anymore, but it is startlingly obvious that there are forces within Warner Brothers that will go out of their way to keep him in the loop, whether some of us want them to or not. We can only hope at this point that Wonder Woman 3 will be set in the present, and that Geoff Johns will be kept far away from it. I'd implore Hera about this, the way Wonder Woman used to, like, "Great Hera, give me strength to withstand more mediocre DC movies." But this continuity seems to have gone with the New 52 era telling of Diana's origins, where that story about her being sculpted from clay really is just a story that her mother Hippolyta tells to avoid talking about the good old-fashioned baby-making session she had with Zeus. Maybe that's the secret reason this movie sucks. The magical explanation for it, say. Great Hera is pissed that a man, or an editorial team of them, more likely, turned one of her last modern champions into just another one of her husband's bastards. So, she cursed this production from the start. She always did like sending plagues among her enemies. But then again, they all did. And I'm glad the fact that they're all dead in this continuity hasn't stopped their artifacts from continuing to cause chaos. Cersei next time, please. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you liked this review, then may all the old gods and the new help you. But also click the like button, and the subscribe button, and the little bell next to the subscribe button that apparently does something, I'm not even sure. And if you really liked the show, then consider supporting the show on Patreon, like the fine people whose names I'm about to read out right now. Mr. Hootie Dean, Detective Steve, The After Movie Diner, and Stu G. Next time, well, that's one big-budget female superhero movie from the late 20-teens. Suppose I might as well tackle the other ones. Maybe make a trilogy out of it. Yep, that does it. We're making a trilogy out of this shit. No sense fighting it.